Howdy.
We're very pleased to see all of you later on Monday afternoon. Thank you. How many of you were here at 10 o'clock at our stuff downstairs?
Ow!
All right, very good. How many of you were also at the 11:30 panel downstairs? See, we have some hardcore folks out here. We really do appreciate you. Thank you. And we do appreciate, especially when you have been here all along and you keep coming back. Typically that means we're doing something right, so we'll probably just keep doing it. Okay, is that all right with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, and before we actually get started, I wanted to remind you we are still doing the charity drive competition. We're not competing charities. We're doing the charity drive for the Atlanta Center for Self-Sufficiency. And over here on your left, we have Leah with our containers that we're doing the Battle of the UF Track Show fandoms. If you would like to contribute to the cause via voting for your favorite show, then it's just kind of a fun way to do that. And I believe, is it still Lucifer in first place?
Lucifer is still in first place. Lost Girl is behind just slightly. And then Librarian is like less than $1.50 away from Lost Girl. So those are the top three, and Naifeh is fourth. So you guys, if you're more of an author person right here, you don't really watch a lot of those shows, if you're not sure which one to put it in, just do me a favor and pick Librarian, so that I can
That's Leah's favorite, and yes, she's... So, in any case, thank you very much, and thank you for being here. But what we're going to do is we're going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then, as you know, most of you are veterans to this track. I'm going to have some questions for them, and then we will open it up for questions from you, and I will make sure and let you know when that is. And what you're going to be doing is lining up with Erica, who is over here. She's standing up and waving her hand. So if you would like to ask a question of the panel, then go and see her when I give you the cue. All right? Let's get started. That's why I gave you the microphone here.
I figured, but it never hurts to check. I'm Eric Asher. I'm the author of the Vesic Urban Fantasy series and the Steamborn Young Adult Steampunk series. And I was once on a panel with Patricia, Briggs, and Jim Butcher.
Hi, I'm John Hartness. I write the Black Knight Chronicles lighthearted urban fantasy series, the Bubba the Monster Hunter comedic horror series of novellas. Yeah, it's exactly what you think it is. And the Quincy Harker Demon Hunter dark fantasy series, and I'm also the publisher and co-founder of Falstaff Books, a micro press based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have free ebooks up here, so come see me when we're done.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get people to listen to me when Jim Butcher's next, so I say free stuff.
Smart business. Hi, I'm Jim Butcher. I'm the author of the Dresden Files.
You have to understand, this group will clap for everyone because the Urban Fantasy Track attendees are the best ever, right?
Yeah.
I'm Patty Briggs. I'm the author of Mercy Thompson series, I think, and the Alpha and Omega series, and a lot of traditional fantasy stuff.
I'm Ted Naifeh. I'm a comic book creator of Courtney Crumrin and the Night Things series, and other great comic book series like Princess Ugg, the Barbarian Princess Going to Princess Finishing School.
Sorry. Hi. First, I just want to thank you all for staying and hanging out with us. This is very cool. Thank you. I'm Tiffany Trent. I am the author of the Hallamere series, which is a dark historical YA. I'm also the author of The Unnaturalist and The Tinker King, which is a young adult steampunk, something. Steampook, I don't know. Steampunk, which also has lots of fairy and magic and things like that in it.
See, it's 1 o'clock on Monday and they're still doing it. Yeah. And it's not, and David Coe's not even here to make you do it, right? Or, no, I shouldn't say make you do it, shame you into do it. But in any case.
I don't want to know what David's been making people do all weekend. But David's a persuasive man.
I was in this room last night, and it was on all night. Oh, geez. Were you guys in here last night at the steampunk ball?
Oh, that thing's great.
That was,
Oh, I bet it was, yeah. Not that I would know because I was probably like working, but anyway.
You were watching on Kevin Hearn last night?
Probably, yeah, that's true. Which is why you don't see him today. He's here this morning. He's on a plane on the way back. But for my first question, you can't hear me, or you can't hear? Yeah, I was going to tell. Okay, can you? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to say something. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I was going to tell her that she needed to put the mic closer, but yeah. Everybody else okay? Do it. We know we can hear John.
I was gonna
Jim, are you good? Okay. And I think everybody else was probably clear enough now, and I'll make sure that Eric speaks up since I can, poke him with my finger or something.
I couldn't hear from Aaron, but I know somebody else said they could hear Patricia. I was like, okay, maybe it's closer.
Right, that'll do it.
Test to make sure everybody can hear.
Yes. Okay. What would you say that for the depictions that you use of the Fae, what's maybe the single defining characteristic? Now I know there's lots more than that, but if you had to pick one, what would be the one that you would say would be the most important?
Mystery. At the end of the day, the Fae, what really establishes them for who they are is that you don't know things about them. They're on some level incomprehensible. And that's what really makes them who they are. There's that element of chaos because you don't know where they're from, so you can't tell where they're going. That really, I mean, they're great because they always have rules that go along with them as well, but there's always things that you just don't know and just don't understand, and that's what makes the Fae who they are.
It's interesting because that's similar to what I was going to say, untrustworthy or inscrutable. Because, like you said, there are always rules, but they also they're like the attorneys of the fantasy world because they find ways to warp those rules and to use them to their own benefit. Because in a lot of people's depictions, the Fae can't lie to you, but that doesn't mean they have to tell you the truth. And that doesn't mean that they have to tell you, it doesn't mean they can't disguise what they're saying. They just, they didn't say that you're drinking Coke Zero. They just said that you're not drinking Pepsi.
They can't lie, but they can deceive.
Yeah.
You only see the face. Can you hear me now? I can't hear myself. So. Yeah, okay, let me try this. That's better. Okay, I'm going to have to do this. Okay, you only see what they want you to see when you look at the Fae. Obviously, that wasn't the right answer.
No, that's it. You're not seeing the real thing. You're seeing the surface. They're seeing the illusion. I would say that they're untamed. That's to me the defining quality is that they're not domestic. Them and their world is the world that isn't domesticated in the way that our world is domesticated, and that makes them interesting. They're the wild nature manifested in magic and strange, the illusion of some kind of human face and some kind of human persona, but the reality behind it is wild, untamed nature.
That took me to Narnia for a minute because I immediately went to he's not a tame lion, and I think that's kind of to your point. It is kind of the same thing.
Narnia, like Aslan is Christian God reinterpreted in a very fairy way.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
That's Winter Court, Summer Court. That's kind of an excellent illustration of it right there is Narnia.
I think what Jim's saying, I agree with too. It's like to me, the single defining characteristic for them would be that they are. Put it well.
Right here.
All right. Hello. They're basically a living dichotomy. So, and I feel like it's that dichotomy that kind of lends itself to building that mystery where you don't really know what they're going to do. It's like they seem loyal at one moment, but their own agendas are actually driving their intentions directly against what you think they're doing.
They're also timeless. I mean, that their time scale is completely different. I mean, that's what's so sort of romantic and tragic about them, right? Is that whenever there's sort of a love affair between a human and the Fae, it always ends in disaster because mortality and immortality just don't mix well, or they have a different kind of mortality than we do, perhaps. You know, like if they are something that sort of passes away after ages, then the time scale is so different that a lot of times human and Fae logic just don't run on the same tracks, right? So that's one thing that's fascinating about them.
As a writer, one of the things I really like about dealing with the Fae is there's such a rich background of lore. So there are words in the English language that have a lot of power. So if I say dragon, I know every one of you just had the image of a dragon in your head. It's not the same dragon, but you know what a dragon is. If I say Fae, you may not have an image in your head, but you're going to go, oh, scary, right? Or you're going to think about all the fairy tales you heard as a kid or reading now as an adult, if you're me. And as a writer, that gives me a lot of powerful emotion that I get to play with. And if I'm making up a creature, they don't have nearly that much. So the Fae are really fun to deal with as a writer.
The breadth of the lore of the Fae also gives us a lot of fun places to play in because everybody's Fae are somewhat different, so you can, you know, Alex Bledsoe's Novels of the Tufa is one of my favorite series, and those are very spoiler. Those are very different Fae than most other people's, and none of it's right or wrong, but there's a lot of, you can pull from a lot of places with where you're creating your Fae, and even in stuff that I've worked on where I'm using the Fae, they're different in different series because they're different things I want to play with as a writer.
Well, that actually is one of my questions, so I'll use that segue to make that the next question. Did you get any inspirational ideas from some of the folklore that you read that was particularly of interest to you, that you said, oh, I can use that and build upon it?
Definitely. I have a couple characters that are loosely based off of some of the folk tales that were collected by Lady Gregory. And of course, a lot of people use characters and creatures that are in Yeats' work. And it definitely has an influence, and probably the most specific one, I actually don't want to say because it would be a huge spoiler for the book I'm writing right now. But
Spit it out.
If it's not going to be out next week, they won't remember it, bro.
Okay, so one of the creatures that I don't see very often in urban fantasies is Dolahan, but I may have said that wrong. But it's basically, it's not death itself, but it's like a bringer of death. And like anytime you see this rider, death is sure to follow wherever he stops. Like wherever he stops, someone dies there. And it's such an interesting, it's just a very interesting creature, and I'm excited to use it.
Nice. I make no bones about the fact that I rip off anyone who I see and like. First panel I was ever on with Jim, I introduced myself as John Hartness. I rip off Jim Butcher for a living. And I'm still waiting for that letter from his lawyer, and thank God. Thanks to you guys, he doesn't mind.
That guy's expensive, are you kidding?
But in my next Bubba the Monster Hunter novella, out October 1st from Falstaff Books, exclusive on Amazon, I blend, I have Bubba playing Pokemon Go dropped into A Midsummer Night's Dream.
I can totally see that.
Because Puck created the version of Pokemon Go to suck you into fairyland.
And they're going to come for you for revealing that little tidbit.
If they don't, parody is protected speech.
But revealing secrets of the Fae is dangerous.
Hey, you're joking, but I got a call from the real White Council once.
I believe it.
Yeah, they were upset about me dispensing secrets. I was like, what are you worried about? Now you've got perfect plausible deniability. You know, anybody who talks about the council, you can just say they were reading my books. Have a nice day.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, right?
He's just pretty. He's quick on his feet, too.
I don't think that they're actually secret. I think they're just more ignored.
Maybe that's it. Yeah. He said he didn't think they were secret. Maybe they were just more ignored.
You're not as special as you think you are. Well, let's see. In Halimere, I was very excited about the Scottish Fae, and I visited Scotland last year, and I'm still alive, so evidently they weren't upset about what I said in the books. But I was very taken by one particular Fae who has a red bloody hand. There's always these fairies that, presage your death, basically. And this was another one that if you saw him at the crossroads and he raised his red hand to you, you were also going to die. But the fun I had with it was, well, what if he wasn't actually Fae, but a human who had been forced to be put in service of the Fae? And so I had a lot of fun playing with this sort of ominous being who just appears to my main character a lot, and I can't tell you the rest because I never got to finish it. But it was really fun to play with that, and to also play with Kelpies, and to think about what these beings would really look like. With a Kelpie, I wove a lot of finger bones into the mane of the Kelpie because I figured people had been dragged down and their fingers were still clutching the mane, So it's really fun horror, actually.
That's delicious.
Delicious.
I just found that, like you were talking about how Fae is almost like an HTML word that you click on, when you put it on there, it automatically becomes a link in everybody's brain to everything that they've ever known. And one of the things, I come from the comic book world where when you say Batman, everybody immediately remembers their favorite Batman story. And the Batman in your head is all of a collection of all those stories that you liked. And that's exactly how the Fae work. So when we read a great story, there's a million bad novels about the Fae, and we ignore them. We forget that we read them and then we forget them. We remember the good ones. We somehow, our brains just keep the wheat and discard the chaff. And is that the right expression?
Yes.
Okay. And
You're okay.
Some brains keep the chaff and discard it.
Yes. Yes, modern urban human.
Thank you. And that's kind of one of the wonderful things about playing with toys that exist outside our own writing. I adore that, and that's why I love comic books, and it's also what I love about genre fiction, is the ability to say vampire and have everybody immediately go, oh yeah, Tom Hiddleston, yeah. Anyway.
Now our minds are in a totally different place.
For those of you who are interested in writing about the Fae, there's a book by Catherine Briggs, spelled Katharine, no relation. Back in the 60s, she was a folklorist, and she did a lot of work with fairy tales and folklore, and that's not the only book she wrote. She talks about, she has a book on where she takes all the fairy tales and breaks them down to common themes and things like that. But an encyclopedia of fairies is exactly what it says. It's an alphabetical encyclopedia of random fairies that you've never heard of, and they're awesome. And her descriptions are pretty spare, but you can take them and then go off on the internet land and see what you can find out. I was raised on folklore and fairy tales. My mother was a librarian, and my sister used to read me fairy tales. If you've been to other panels, I've said this before. When I did Z, when I created Z, I drew on some fairy tales I sort of vaguely remembered reading when I was about 10 or 11, because my mother's library was a school library with a bunch of donated books, and we had really freaky, weird things that I found out were really freaky, weird fairy tale books in there, old ones that were published in the 1920s and that kind of thing. And when I decided to write, kind of center a story around him, I had to figure out where those were so I could make sure that I got things right that I wanted to get. I only like to make the mistakes that I want to make. I want to change the things, but by being stupid, I don't want to do that. So it took me a long time to run it down, and bless the fact that the internet will post things that are out of copyright. And I found a copy of it. It was I think it's called Folktales of the Isle of Man. And it was a wonderful, weird, quirky book of folktales that are kind of a combination of Celtic and Norse folktales. So you'll have Patty O'Brien and the Dark Smith of Dronheim went out and had a beer or something, which is really strange. I've got a degree in German, and seeing the German and the Irish and the Scots all together in the same story is really pretty funny.
I like French fairy stories myself. I think they're the most marketable. Because the French fairy tales are full of sex and violence, and that is what they are about. If you're going to get eaten by an ogre, it's going to look like a beautiful woman right up until it eats you, and that comes after the sex. That's what the French fairy tales are like. So,
Better than my entire college experience.
That's actually a very, that goes to show you that the title of this panel, being Dangerous Beauty, actually fits quite well with what Jim just said. So,
And just in case there's one person who didn't notice, yeah, that was me and Eric writing down the names of every book that Patty travels on. Yeah, no, we weren't checking text. We were on Amazon to buy that shit.
your wish list just grew, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Three sizes that day.
And sometimes we get depictions of the Fae where they don't really look human, where they're, or they might glamour themselves to look human. Some of them do have human countenances, and what I'm curious about though is that when they have these interactions with humans, do you see them as taking on more human characteristics? What does that do when they have as much contact with humans as they do? How much of the two kind of end up melding together?
For me, the Fae are hidden. They're hidden from humanity, so they don't really have much direct contact in the beginning of the stories. But later on, when there's a big shift and the Fae become visible to humanity, and they still have the same look. Some of them look, I guess you could say they're passable, like they look human enough that they don't intimidate people, but others are like, I use Trusa, which are like Highland, big, very large Highland wolfhounds that are green and very mean if they don't like you, like you're pretty much dead. So,
And very drooly.
they are very drooly, yeah. So that's a lot of fun. But others, I use like traditional Nixie stories, which are like Undines, and they appear as like beautiful women until they eat you or drown you and really enjoy drowning you. So There's definitely the passable ones, and there's the big scary ones that as soon as humans saw them, they would just run screaming.
So far in my work, I haven't had a place in the stories where I needed the Fae to drop the glamour and look anything other than human or vaguely Orlando Bloomish. I mean, it's not a bad way to go through life looking like Orlando Bloom, but, or at least I've heard. But I haven't needed to use that yet. I'm waiting on the right moment for that to be a good reveal for, hey, whoa, you were hot a minute ago. And now lots more teethy.
I thought a lot about, the Seelie, the unseelie, and sort of the fairy courts and how the interaction with humans would affect them. And essentially what I ended up doing was with the unseelie, making them reliant on human blood in order to survive in the mortal world, which means that they continue to be beautiful only as long as they continue to get human food, right? So once, if they aren't able to catch humans and seduce them into getting what they need from them, then they start looking pretty nasty. And that was sort of the difference between the two courts, that the other court had decided that they weren't going to do that, they weren't going to stoop to that. So that was fun.
I think when when the Fae are hiding behind human guises, they're really pretty dangerous. Our ancestors called them, good neighbors and the fair folk, because they didn't want to, the shiny ones, because you did not want to offend them, and they're notoriously easy to offend.
Call them the good people as wish fulfillment, so to speak.
Right, exactly. You leave gifts out, say, oh no, here, please, have some milk, don't destroy my farm. So they're very dangerous, and sometimes if you don't offend them, if you actually please them, that's even worse, and then they give you a gift. Like where Thomas the Rhymer could tell a lie, right?
Right, here's a gift. Oh God, from the fairies. Oh God. I'm doing you a favor. What?
They have an exchange or returns policy.
I always figured that they just didn't understand what, like we think of truth as such an important and noble thing, so here you go.
Oh no, she was totally punishing him.
Oh really?
He went to the fairy queen and said, how do I explain my absence? He didn't realize how long he'd been gone, but he said, how do I explain my absence? I'll tell people I was with the fairy court and they won't believe me. And she says, oh no, I'll fix that. Here, you can't tell a lie. And once they figure that out, then they'll believe what you said, but also you can't tell a lie.
Oh man.
And he was a real person. You guys all know that, right? Thomas the Rhymer was a real person. And we have, like written documents where he's written things down, so that story is pretty awesome. I really like it.
That's crazy.
But that also gives interesting space to play in, the concept that they are so far removed from humanity that they don't understand that what they're doing. It's a different way of approaching them from a writing standpoint, but it's an interesting space to play in, is that they do things and they're like, oh wait, you mean that was bad? Oh well.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's part of who they are. They're alien. They're other. They always are. And they understand some things only too well, and then other things they're just completely clueless about. And which things are which kind of depends on the fairy in question.
50,000 years has not been long enough for me to figure out you creatures.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes a little longer.
That's what I say to my wife all the time.
I've been married a long time.
I love the idea that the human appearance in these spirit creatures just falls away like a snakeskin when you realize that they're as that's just so that we can comprehend what we're looking at, what we're trying to understand. Like what's behind that human illusion is totally incomprehensible. And we were saying that incomprehensible is kind of the fairy's middle name. That's what the mystery is about. But I kind of equated to the idea of you know, like trying to understand how the world works. You know, we don't know what, like for thousands of years, we didn't know what a gallbladder was. So when one ruptured, we had no idea why people were dropping dead. So we invented, you know, the man with the red right hand. You know, as Nick Cage used
You've
to
got
sing about.
gallstones. That's what
People just drop dead for no reason. I mean, you know, I was reading.
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I was reading Jane Austen, and she's like, you know, Emma's father is like always telling everybody that, oh, you shouldn't be eating that because it's bad for you. No, it's bad for you because you probably have, you know, some kind of gallbladder problem or gout or something that nobody knows what it is.
I'm a really bad person, Tiffany. When you were talking about the guy with the red right hand, I thought of all the teenagers that would go to a crossroads with a red glove and jump out at their friends in the middle of the night.
Was that a thing?
Totally.
I don't know if that was a thing, but it would have been if I had been a teenager back
It's like the Blair Fairy Project.
Our death fairies wear hockey masks and they have hooks for hands. That's what our death fairies look like these days.
But what's behind the
Chainsaws.
You know, what's behind the faces are the mysteries of the universe that we can't, we'll never, either we don't understand now or we'll never understand. And that's kind of what's so great about, that's why fairies are such a great metaphor.
Well, on a panel that we had on the Fae, it says 2013, so it was a while ago. Jim, you made the comment that one of the interesting things about them to you was that their motivations are unclear, and that's something that's always kind of confusing. That you know, if you don't understand where somebody's coming from, it makes it worse. And that led me to think: is that because? Do you think that the one aspect of that might be that because maybe they seem like more extreme versions of us? That, you know, that's what bothers us about other human beings, when we don't understand what somebody's trying to do or where they're coming from.
Well, the thing is if you don't understand what somebody's trying to do or where they're coming from, there's no way that you can influence where they're going. It's a loss of control that you don't have. If somebody comes up to me in the bar and they're really upset about, it's another human being, and they're really upset about something, I can try and de-escalate that situation. I can try and talk that guy down. Hey man, what's wrong? What's going on? Let me get you a drink, man. You can tell me what's happening. You know, that's the kind of thing that you can exert some control over. When it's a fairy and you just don't know, they're coming from that alien perspective, you don't know what's going to make them angry. You don't know what's going to make them happy. You don't know how you're going to get out of the situation that you suddenly find yourself in, because you don't have any control over it with all these social mechanisms that we have for other human beings.
You know, sometimes fairies just, they don't need you to solve the problem for them. They just want to be heard.
Yeah, and sometimes they just want to cut your throat and dip their hat in your blood, too. That's kind of the point.
You're saying that's not a normal human motivation.
The rest of you, I'd like you to respond to that too. Not about the hat, but about the
Blood everywhere.
Well, you know, as a writer, we writers have to understand the motivation of our faith, because people are incredibly good pattern recognition beasts. We look at things and you can just, you know, we put 3 squiggles up and you go, oh, look, it's a star. And, you know, it doesn't look anything like a star, but we know that this looks like a star. And you put a squiggle up and you go, and I put a squiggle up and you say, oh, look, it's a horse. We're really good at that. So if we're writing a book, as a writer, if I don't know what the motivation of my fae is, then pretty soon you guys are going to be really uncomfortable. And pretty soon you're going, I don't like this book. This character makes no, you may not even think that, but you may go, I just don't connect to this, that's stupid. Because you don't understand, well, you can feel that I don't understand what's causing the fae to act. So as a writer, we always have to figure that out, even though our characters don't know what it is.
And it's the narrator, the characters may not know what's going on and may not understand the motivation, but the writer the writer has to know, and the reader at least has to trust. There has to be something breadcrumbing that to the reader that someone knows. It's okay for someone in the world to not know why the Fae want to wear bloody hats, but you have to create enough faith with your readership that they will believe that you know and that you will eventually tell them.
Trust me, I'm the storyteller.
Yeah, well, now we're talking about writing craft, and writers betray that covenant all the time, and it's really annoying.
I think it partially comes back to the very first question where we talked about the dichotomy of Fae in general. And you get conflicting agendas between different characters. And in one of my books, a very close friend who happens to be Fae with Damien, who's the protagonist, she ends up being betrayed by her spouse of the last several centuries. And he's kind of like, that's cool because it still fits into my plan. So he lets her die because she has to sacrifice herself to save Damien because of what her essentially husband has set into motion. So it was, and I spent 4 or 5 books setting up like the fact that she was compassionate enough to actually sacrifice herself to do that. Whereas you would have thought her husband was, but his motivations were completely different because his agenda was to actually kind of take his rightful place more as the king of the world as opposed to just the king of the Fae. And those agendas clearly didn't mesh.
But you set that up too, presumably.
Oops.
That's the trick. I mean, that's the trick, is to set something up and still have the reader not see it coming. And then they look back and they realize, oh, this is the only thing that of course this guy did this.
Yes,
Of course
exactly.
he did it. Yeah.
I come from a theater background, and most stage performance is all about objectives, tactics. What do you want? How are you going to get it? And if you don't want anything and you're not doing anything active, then, then it starts, and nobody's going to buy a ticket. But writing and storytelling is the same way. Someone has to know what they want. And if you take that away, it needs to be done very, very well, because you're tweaking and playing around with one of the basic parts of our understanding of story and character, is that people and things want things. So if you have that hidden motivation and that incomprehensible motivation, it has to happen for a reason. It can't just be, I want to play with something that no one will understand, because that's going to bleed into everything else that character touches. So there we go. You don't want to break your covenant with the reader of, I'm a storyteller, I know what I'm doing, it's my house, I built the walls, we're good.
It's not going to fall in on you.
Right.
You're safe with me.
Exactly, because that is what we're telling readers, is your time and money, but your time is a valuable gift to us, and I'm not going to waste the investment of it. And when you break some of these basic tenets of how we understand story, then you better have a really good reason and do it very skillfully.
It's interesting too to see in stories and the way readers relate to stories. I mean, when there is an inscrutable character, you're never sure of their motivation, but they're compelling characters. We become obsessed with trying to piece together who they are and what they really want. And that's kind of part of what, as a reader, that's part of the joy of being a reader, is to try to tease out what was Snape's real motivation.
And there we get flashback.
Eric is overcome then. Tiffany?
Well, I was thinking about the fact that when I'm working with the Fae, I'm thinking about an emissary of the wild, a thing that has no human logic, but still has some very basic tenets that they need to follow, and one is survival. they are going to need to find a way to go on. And that was something with the Unseelie in my first series, where and continuing. And so the Fae Prince, that's, you know, part of his motivation. What I found interesting about my readership was he was completely nasty and manipulative and was manipulating this young girl to serve his interests, and they didn't care. My readership did not care. They loved him. And I was like, he's bad, y'all. I mean, like, I don't know how many times, like, and I even wrote a story from his point of view, a short story, sort of a prequel, to try to explain to my readers, this guy is bad, and they still didn't care. They just ate it up. It was fascinating to me.
It is interesting.
So, like, even when I sort of took the lid off his motivations, because it was never told from his point of view in the actual books, that didn't matter.
And you're revealing that.
And
no,
they're revealing
he's just a
jerk. Bad, jerk.
You know, that reminds me of an interview I saw with Sting, and he was talking to the interviewer and about the fact that Every Breath You Take is like the second most common wedding song played at weddings, and it's about a stalker. It's about a stalker.
It's one of the creepiest songs ever.
What's the first most popular is Don't Stand So Close to Me?
That's when the creeper gets what he wants, right? And decides he doesn't want it.
Maybe Sting is Fae for all we know.
You know, sometimes it just seems like, usually we try really hard and we get the right message out and it comes back and we're like, yes. And then sometimes we try really hard to get the right message out and all of you guys come back and go, we're over here. We got this completely different message. And it just goes back to show us that a book is not real until somebody reads it. It's only half done. When we get through with the book, it's only half done.
The book is the Fae. We write it.
I love this. He took this and brought it back on topic. That was very nicely done.
We put it out into the world, but it's not up to us what it is, what it means, what it wants. The book wants what it wants. We just wrote it, and we don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We think we know what we meant.
And all of these folks will be happy to tell you.
Again.
And at this point, if you, I've got one more question, the short question. So if you want to ask a question of the panel, please line up with Erica over here in the aisle. But my question for you is, out of all of your fake characters, which one have you most enjoyed writing?
That's an easy one for me. I have a character named Foster, and he is kind of like a little bumbly, giggly, not giggly, he's not giggly. But, alright, so a lot of people are like, oh, he's like my book boyfriend, but then he turns like super violent and just at a snap. And it's a lot of fun having this kind of very friendly, joking character whose best friend is a vampire, and then my Fae also, like, they go from their standard 6 to 7 inch size, and then when they go into battle, they're more like 7 to 8 feet tall. So you get these very imposing figures with huge wings and
Pants that stretch.
pants that stretch, full on armor that stretches.
In the Black Knight Chronicles, one of the main characters in book 2 has a cousin who is estranged from the family and is a gay male ballet dancer in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's discovered that he's actually a changeling. So I have a fairy ballet dancer.
Hold me closer, tiny dancer.
As you do. So I write comedy, so getting to play in those puns was a fine line. And I think no one's come at me yet. And I'm 4 more books in, so.
For me, it's the Queen of Air and Darkness, Mab.
Yeah.
Mav is fun to write. She is, because she gives zero fucks about anything. She will get it. Whatever she has to do, she will do, and it's fun to write that implacable character with it. Because you just look at your hero and you go.
I believe your term from the other day was unapologetically maddish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, saying Z would be cheap because he's a full character. So let me back off and say, Yo-Yo Girl, I really had an awesome job. She's creepy, and all she does is stand around and be creepy until she turns like huge, powerful, nasty bad guys into ash. And it's awesome. She was so much fun.
I have a few, like it's easy to slip into, oh yeah, I loved writing the Fairy King, and I loved writing the Dark Princess, the Dreadful Duchess character, and they're all fun. All these characters fairies are just fun to write. They're so you make them very formal, and then they get to be feisty, and their formality suddenly has a twist to it. But my favorite, I think my personal favorite was, I have a character named Rawhead and Bloody Bones, who's the most horrible, creepy monster in my Courtney Crumrin series. But he goes by Tommy Rawhead. And so he's terrifyingly awful, and he eats children, but he's funny.
And once you laugh, you can't be mad at him.
Yeah, exactly. You can't be mad at, you're so cute, Tommy, I can't be mad at you. He's like 8 feet tall, horribly disfigured and hunched over, and he's got a giant skeletal grin. But he's funny.
Yay. I do like writing the Fae Prince I mentioned before you, and I enjoy his darkness. I enjoy the way that he kind of pulls the wool over everybody's eyes, and it's super fun to just see my readers react to him, so I like that. But I also have a little sylph in the Unnaturalist series named Piskel, and he has, whenever he gets very emotional, he changes colors kind of like a squid or a cephalopod, and at one point he's making fun of my character and he laughs so hard he turns himself plaid, which I really enjoyed that. So he was a lot of fun to write.
I can tell you who I wish I'd written. I really wish I'd written Puck, Rob Thurman's Puck, who is just an amazing character, really fun.
Puck gives you a lot of space to play in, too, because even in the original Shakespeare portrayal, there's that dark side to him that gives you a lot of places to play. If we shadows have offended, think that this and all is mended. I'm a fairy, you can kiss my furry ass.
And on that note,
I could come from that. Thanks. Thank you, panel, for everything you've mentioned. I was wondering if the panel could comment on a lot of the fair depicted from Great Britain and also just sort of Western European traditions and mythologies. How do you incorporate and use international mythologies like the Jinn or like Devas from Indian mythology, or how you manage incorporating other mythologies that might be playing as fairies or fae, or maybe not, and then also how you manage the cultural appropriation kind of thing.
Can I? That's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. I play a lot in China with Chinese beings and culture and things like that, because I lived there, I worked there, my daughter is Chinese. I feel more comfortable with it, so I have to admit there's a bit of a comfort thing for me, where if I feel very comfortable with a culture, I feel like, and I've experienced it and I've lived it, then I feel better about not appropriating, because I feel like I know a little bit more about the rules. If I didn't know, and I always have my Chinese friends checking me to make sure. If I didn't know, I would probably be having, other friends, like if I was trying to write African things or Indian things or whatever, I would ask my African or Indian friends to please help and check me with this. But I've got, like, for instance, you know, the Chinese sort of pantheons, because there are many, are extremely rich, and I don't see a lot of people doing that. And I've played a lot with doing a sort of Chinese Alice in Wonderland thing, because, you know, there are like 7 levels of hell that you can play with. You know, so there are a lot, and there are Chinese bestiaries. I have wonderful books. Like, if you ever go over to another country, there are wonderful books, and one that I managed to grab was a Chinese bestiary of like all these fascinating beings that, you know, are just not present in Western.
Great folklore.
It's great folklore, and you know, for Chinese stuff, now I'm kind of advising, go watch Peking opera. Okay, it is the best thing ever. Lady Whitesnake is beautiful, and you get to really understand a lot about the culture and what's important to them by watching their art. You know,
The French like sex, and ugly trolls would be eat their prey. Right?
so.
Okay, next question.
So I was wondering, are the Fae, since they're also mischievous and self-serving, are they all inherently evil? Or do they have to have some kind of moral compass since they can't tell a lie?
If you guys play D&D, you'll know that lawful neutral is actually the scariest of the moral orientations that there is. And I think lawful neutral describes the Fae very well. They have rules that they have to follow, but they don't have to tell you what they are.
And you don't have to like them either.
And I was going to use a different alignment reference, but I was going to say don't confuse chaotic with evil.
Sean, that was very nice. Thank you. He very cleverly slid me in the right word that I was looking for. Thank you. Alignment. So.
Alignment.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jim's a role-playing expert. Yeah. Okay. I might podcast Pathfinder, but I mean, you're way bigger role-playing nerd than me. But no, don't confuse chaotic with and capricious with evil. So they might just, you know, well, I mean, I kind of roll through life, just kind of things happen around me and I do things. It doesn't really mean I'm bad. It just means I leave a swath of chaos in my way.
I think part of the nature of the Fae too, part of their mystery is that in order to make a judgment about somebody's morality, you've got to kind of know a lot about them. You know, I mean, you can understand, okay, somebody who steals, that's wrong. He was starving and stole a loaf of bread to feed his little sister who's even worse off than he is. Okay, that's different. You know,
Jean Valjean.
Yeah, exactly. You know the background of that, because you know that person, you can make that judgment, and it changes the way we see it. With the Fae, you just don't know enough about them. They almost exist in a way outside of morality, because they are mysterious to us, and what they're doing is mysterious to us.
They're not immoral, they're amoral.
Exactly.
Or they're differently moral. Differently moral.
Well, also, the concept of good and evil is a very subjective one, because what's evil to me is good for the person who hit me over the head and took my stuff.
Sorry.
I don't know who it was. I want my records back. So, and it's interesting, like I've been doing some research into like old Greek myth for this current book that I'm working on, and they didn't measure morality by good versus evil, they measured it by compassion versus hubris, which I find a very different and interesting scale. Of course, it also doesn't apply to fairies either, because they're so inscrutable, we don't know whether they're motivated by compassion or hubris. They just do things.
Hi, I read a lot of fairy folk, and I love the world of fairies. So I see that some of you use Sealy Port and the King and Queen of Fairies. Others use, like Patricia uses, the Grey Lords. What makes you choose what governing body of fairy you're going to use to govern your fairies?
Okay. I'll bite.
Stump the panel.
Right. I picked the Grey Lords because I figured that my Fae are just decimated, and I use that in the figurative, not literal sense. But their courts, everything has just been destroyed over the years. So they're trying to hold on by their fingernails to survive, and in order to do that, you have to have several of the meanest mother pumpers.
Welcome to the F-bomb, so we're good.
That's okay. My husband's sitting in the audience, and he'll be mad at me. But they need somebody who can sit on some of these really, really scary fae. We need somebody even really, really scarier. And so I just created the Grey Lords, and I don't know I don't know why I picked what term, but I just wanted them to be this scary, nebulous bunch of people of fae who could terrify people like evil Adelaide, kind of, and keep them from being violent and attacking humans. So that's what I went with.
From a purely too much information about how the sausage is made standpoint, I was building secondary characters in a secondary setting that I wasn't going to use that often. So I wanted to shortcut world building. So I went with things that were more common in the urban fantasy vernacular. So I used ground that had been well trodden because it was not going to be the primary setting or the primary characters even for that story. So I shortcutted because it got me to the point I needed to get to more quickly.
With me, my stories center more around like necromancy and things like that. So Gwynnot Mood really appealed to me because he's kind of, in a lot of folk tales, he was kind of like the Lord of Death. So I just wanted to tie him in. So it wasn't necessarily a conscious choice to say, I want to use this court and he happens to be in this court. It was actually, I wanted a character based on that folklore icon.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, as writers, we generally have an idea of where we would like our story to go, but we also write it with very strong personality characters who sometimes take that story and try to go off in some other direction. What are some of the methods that you use, especially with fairies who, as we've discussed, have all sorts of other ideas of what should and should not be? What are some of the methods that you use to bring them back to where you might like the story to go?
They have to follow the outline, just like
everybody else.
Because otherwise, I'm not going to get the book turned in on time, so we don't have time for detours. I make up the world, I make up the story, I tell them what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, those people work for you.
Do what I want or no damn pizza.
And the great part is that since you're the controller of the reality in that world, you can always go back in earlier and change things around so that they're motivated to go the way you want them to go.
See, and I just say, yay, and follow them.
I find that what's great about fairy characters is that the character that just can be the most heinously villainous villain in one story, you can just flip them over and make them very what do you call it?
Charismatic?
Well, no, I mean just that you feel for them. What is that word? I'm sorry.
Sympathetic.
Sympathetic. You can make them very sympathetic in the very next story because fairies are inscrutable. They, who knows what they're going to be in each story. And so, I find that if the fairy characters start going off in their own direction, maybe you're trying to put too much control over them. Maybe, what a fairy is a very malleable type of character. You can really send them in whatever direction you want. And make it work if you handle them right. But that's just mine. Anyways, all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if it feels like a piece of action that you really need, that sounds really weird. Sorry. Pardon. It's too early in the day for that. if it feels like you need that somehow, or you need to know that about that character or whatever, I will go off to the side and write it for a little bit just so I understand it. Sometimes it will work itself into a short story, which is a nice corollary, or a novella or something like that. But in general, I will put it off to the side in like a cuts file or something like that so that I have it if I need it, but run away with me. Because, yeah, we have deadlines and outlines.
Well, and I have to say, really, characters come from your from you. When you're a writer, characters come from you. And I always feel like I co-write with my subconscious. And at any point in time, if I get to a place and it doesn't feel like, I feel like I'm forcing the character to do something, then I know I've got it wrong. And I have to see what was going on. And maybe I will have to change something in the characters, make them do what I need them to do to get through to the end of the story. I am that much of a professional, okay? But I really have to say that if by the time I'm halfway through the book, if I don't know the characters better than when I started, or halfway through the series, for heaven's sakes, I don't know the characters better now than when I started, then I'm not doing my job. And I kind of like following them because they lead me into unexpected places. And I don't know about you, but that's my favorite part of being a pantser, is that I don't know how the story's going to end anyway, and that's why I write the freaking story. So that I can see what happens in the end.
Yeah, well, I had like one character that did not want, I couldn't figure out why he was acting like such a jerk. Like, why are you being such an incredible jerk? And I finally was like, okay, fine. And I went and wrote from his point of view for a little while, and I was like, oh my God, okay. Right? You know, that's why.
Everybody's the hero of their story.
Yeah, right, exactly. And
It
so
is the creepiest thing in the world when your characters start doing that the first time, though. Really, seriously.
you really wonder you really wonder if you're missing some essential vitamin.
If it is anywhere near the amount of drugs I did in the 90s, it's just about
And I don't have that excuse. No, I don't either.
You said you co-write with your subconscious. I'm just taking dictation. I think most of us are. We think that we're in control of a lot of this, but no.
I've been married 20 years. I know I'm not in control of crap.
And on that note, let's give our panelists a hand. And thanks very much again to all of you who have, stuck around to see everyone. We really appreciate it. You've been here all weekend. Some of you, how long? Some of you have been here since Friday. How many? Yeah. Okay, and how many of you have been coming to stuff on this track since Friday? Okay, we love you. Don't we love them? Thank you very much. And don't forget on your way out that you can go by and contribute to the DragonCon charity if you so choose. Thank you very much, everyone.
And come to free books on the Briggs.